prime rib, a classic meal that has graced holiday tables for centuries. In this series, we're taking you every step of the way, from learning grades of beef to easily making a standing rib roast. Welcome to Cooking the Classics. I'm your host, Lisa Sherman.
Hey, where's the beef?
In this episode, we're going on a field trip and learn all about beef from an expert butcher, Casey Miller, who is also the owner of The Meeting Place, a destination meat market in Hillsboro, Oregon.
Road trip.
So, let's hit the road. Casey, you want to tell us a little bit about your shop?
Sure. So we are a full-service butcher shop here at The Meeting Place. So we do everything from on-farm slaughter to custom processing to providing the highest quality proteins we can find. Along with, we make all of our processed meat. So all of our bacon, sausage, pepperoni, lunch meat is all made right here in-house.
Sounds so yummy. Could you kind of help us out with picking a good piece of roast?
I'd be happy to.
Where do we go?
Well, let's go to the meat block.
We're here. This is amazing. What are those different grades of meat?
Most people are familiar with select, choice, prime. That's really just a measurement of the fat in the beef. When the inspectors evaluate a carcass, they're really just measuring the fat on the interior of a ribeye to determine if that's a select beef, which is the lowest amount of fat on a carcass, a choice beef, which has a medium or to high amount of fat, and then a prime, which has the most amount of fat. Now, there's a lot more that goes into deciding the quality of meat than just those three categories. A lot of people get hung up on if it's just choice, it's great. There can be choice beef that's not great, and a big misconception about prime beef is that if you buy prime beef, it's going to be the best. Well, all the most expensive steakhouses, restaurants, they buy up all the premium prime on the market. So what you find at some of the retailers that advertise prime beef is actually your lowest grade of prime beef. We try to carry what we call upper end 3/4 choice, which is all on the higher end of the choice category. And then we've just started actually our own ranch this year where we're raising our own beef. We literally control the quality from the ground up, and we're also able to cut the carbon out of the production of beef by up to 50%, and they're processed and sent out of the butcher shop right here, never hitting a piece of plastic. It's better for the environment, it's better for the beef, and it's better for the consumer.
Angus, Kobe, Wagyu, and it gets really confusing. What should the consumer know?
Most beef in America now is at least an Angus cross. We only carry 100% Angus. So Angus is the predominant breed in America for high quality beef. Now when you get into other names like Wagyu, that's one people are familiar with. So Wagyu beef is a cross between Asian Kobe beef and American Angus for an American Wagyu. And then there's also Kobe beef that we import from Japan, which is graded on a different scale from A1 to A5, but we will actually import A5 Kobe beef from Japan for Christmas and Thanksgiving and the holidays.
Now I've had A5. It tastes almost like bacon in its fat content. It's so marvelous.
It's a different animal altogether, literally. It's the highest quality beef in the world, and there's nothing that really compares to it. One big catchphrase you're going to hear is grass-fed. So that's an independent line that never has grain finish. So that's going to be a leaner beef, but a lot of people feel it has a lot of health benefits for not ever eating the grains. You're going to pay more for it because it takes a lot longer to get to size, be able to harvest, and it's going to be a much leaner product.
Dry aging versus wet aging, but I don't even know what aging is.
Aging helps the muscles relax. So it helps the fibers of the muscles start to kind of separate and give you a more tender cut. So wet aging is when it's in a cryovac bag, so it's going to have no oxygen in the bag. Most beef goes into primals and then a vacuum pack bag like this, and it can stay in this bag up to 2 months. You have no oxygen in here, so it's really limiting your bacteria growth and the breakdown of the muscle. Dry aging is where we expose the muscle and we either hang the whole carcass or we take primals and we leave it exposed to the air in a refrigerated environment. And this helps break the meat down much faster. But it's going to add bacteria growth. It's going to look real yucky on the outside during the whole process. But before we're ready to sell this rib, the whole outside is going to get peeled and stripped away to expose the meat that's been dry aged underneath it.
How much do you end up taking off?
Probably about 30% of the weight. And another thing with dry aging is we're removing the water during this whole time, and that's why being exposed to the air is so important. So meat has a lot of water in it, and as it condenses in that and we get the water out of the meat, we're going to find a much more condensed beefy flavor along with a more separation of the muscle fibers, which is going to give you your tenderness. So that's why a dry aged cut of meat is going to have a much heartier, richer, beefy flavor and also be more tender than your standard wet aged or cryovac piece of meat.
Is this why dry aged meat is more expensive at the store?
Yes, it's time. So these will sit in our coolers for 30 to 45 or even more days that we have to sit and wait on them. And then we've lost 30% of the weight, and then we have to cut off more of it. So yes, you're ending up with a much lighter, condensed piece of meat with a lot more waste than we would have on something like this. But this meat will also cook much faster and won't shrink as much as your normal cut because the water's been removed. So in a typical cooking process, a regular roast like this is going to lose 30% and it comes out much smaller and condensed because we cook the water out. Something like this, it's going to cook much faster, and you're not going to see that reduction because there's not the amount of moisture and water to cook out of the roast.
Can you tell us what this rib roast is?
Right, so this is a whole entire rib roast, which is what we call a 7-rib prime rib. So there's lots of different names for rib roast. Prime rib, standing rib, ribeye roast. We call them a prime rib roast. So 7 ribs is going to be as big as you can get on a prime rib. And this is Painted Hills beef out of Oregon. And this is one of our upper end choice, which you can tell by the fat quality inside the beef.
Oh, wow.
This is definitely a premium full ribeye product. So in most cookbooks, people are going to refer you to the small end of the ribeye. The small end of the ribeye is what actually we break from the New York, which is the leaner side. Great cut. This is what we call the large end, and this is where we break from the chuck side of the beef.
Now let me stop you here. It's funny because the large end has the smaller bones and the small end has the bigger bones.
Good catch. So it's a bit of an oxymoron and a bit confusing. The reason it's called that is because this connects with the chuck muscle, which is a big shoulder muscle. This side connects with the rest of the loin, which is your New York or T-bone muscle, which is a smaller cut. So it's referred to when you're looking at the whole carcass as the small end and the large end. But once we break it down into ribeye, it's actually the opposite.
Do either of the ends have any difference in taste or flavor?
They will. This is going to have more marbling on the large end. It's closer to the chuck. And it actually does have a bit different flavor just because it's closer to that chuck muscle and the marbling that has in it. And this is a little bit leaner side, and this is going to have a little bit less fat, but still is a really high quality cut.
So in most supermarkets, when you're getting your prime rib, what you want to think about are the bones and how they're attached to your roast.
As you can see, there's a whole rib on the back side of this. And it actually cooks better with the rib because when you put it in your pan, it's sitting up and you're getting circulation around the whole piece of meat, and you're also getting the flavor of the bone. But with that whole big bone on the back side, it makes it very difficult to carve for your guests when you're ready to eat it. So here at the meeting place, we cut and tie all of our ribs is what we call it. So I'm just gonna start with your average kitchen knife you can use, but I'm gonna take my knife and I'm gonna angle it up right towards those ribs. So I'm staying right on the ribs as I'm starting to loosen up that meat. I'm gonna take another swipe at it. Once again, keeping my knife right on the ribs as I bring it up.
And this is just a boning knife.
This is just your regular average boning knife. So now as we start to get down, we're going to continue to loosen that rib. We're going to open up all that delicious fat that we're going to access later. And I'm going to take these ribs and I'm going to take them all the way to the end. But what I don't do is I don't cut them all the way off because I want to keep this meat intact so that when we're cooking, we're not losing all of that juice and marbling out the backside. Now, another thing, if you're going to cut and tie it at home, I highly recommend taking just a little average kosher salt, and we're going to salt the inside of this because you're not going to be able to season it again. So we're going to put a heavy amount of salt on that back side right there. So we're going to start with just your average butcher string, which you should be able to find. Now we're going to tie the rib back on, starting in the center, using a butcher's knot, which is a little bit difficult, but you can use any knot you want. The nice thing about a butcher knot is that once you put it on there, I'm able to slide it tight to make sure that we're getting a nice, good connection with the meat. So now that we got all the ties secured on the end, we're going to put a couple of strings in the middle just to make sure we got that rib on there nice and tight. All right, now we've got a whole 7-rib prime rib roast ready to put in your pot and cook. Now once you finish the cooking process, you can pull it out of the oven, let it rest. All you're gonna have to do is cut these strings off and the bone comes off. You can move it to the side and then you can easily carve it for your guest. There's lots of different ways to cook it. You're gonna see tons of different methods in cookbooks. I have one simple rule: don't overcook it. Pay attention to the temperature and make sure you pull it out before it gets to your desired temperature, because a roast this size is going to continue to cook 5 to 8 degrees once you pull it out of the oven and it's resting.
Okay, so here, Casey has prepared this lovely, lovely prime rib for us that we're going to cook in our next segment. Casey, thank you so much
for coming.
Your information was invaluable, and I really do appreciate everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And please remember, if you're not in Hillsboro, Oregon, or in the Portland metro area, please try to support your local businesses and local butcher shops. You will not be disappointed. I hope you enjoyed learning about beef from Casey as much as I did. In the next segment, I'll show you how to cook this bad boy. In the meantime, if you like our show, click the thumbs up and hit subscribe. Bye for now, friends. Ciao.